Dear students, last time we have seen the introduction of auditing, in which we have seen that origin of auditing, definitions of auditing given by various experts, features of auditing, nature of auditing, and objectives of auditing. After discussing these basic aspects, we are required to see the next aspect, which consists of advantages of auditing, limitations of auditing, and errors and frauds. So today we are going to discuss here these aspects and accordingly see that what are the advantages of auditing. We have seen that auditing is necessary in the business organization because of the changes which are took place in the business world. Thereby it is necessary to see what is the reason of auditing. Auditing is a necessity for the following reasons. The first reason is to review the system of accounting and internal control followed in the organization. All the organizations are following various accounting systems as well. They having the different internal control system in the organization. So audit is taking the review of this system which are followed by the organization in their account for their accounting as well for their internal control. Second reason is to review the system and procedures of business. Every business have its own procedure, its own system, and so audit is necessary for understanding or taking the review of these systems which are followed by business organization. Third reason is to examine the documentary evidence to determine the authenticity, validity, and recording of transaction. All of we are aware that every transaction is recorded in the business organization on the basis of documentary evidence. Thereby, audit is examine the authenticity, validity, and recording of the transaction which is based on the various documents. Next reason is that to ensure arithmetical accuracy of transactions recorded. When transaction is recorded in the business organization, that time it is necessary that the transactions are arithmetically accurate, have arithmetical accuracy in the recording, and it is ensured by the auditing. Auditing is also necessary for verify the title existence and valuation of assets. The business organization have various assets. Thereby there are necessity that the title of the asset as well its existence and valuation is required to be examined, and it can be examined through the audit in the organization as well to ensure distinction between capital expenditure and revenue expenditure, to report on the truth and fairness of the accounts, and to ensure the accounts are prepared are in conformity with the statutory requirements. The need is that the accounts which are maintained by the organization, this should be according to the statutory requirement of the concerned statute under which the organization is working, and these are ensured by the auditor, and thereby these are the various reasons by which the audit is necessary. After considering these reasons of the necessity, when audit is undergone in the business organization, that time it having some advantages. We already seen that audit is voluntary in case of sole traders or partnership firm, but the audit is necessary for smooth functioning of the organization. But audit is made compulsory in the Companies Act And when it is made compulsory in the following Companies Act, that time it having following advantages. These advantages are classified in three categories: the advantages for business point of view, advantages to the investors, and other advantages. So we are required to see that these advantages which are derived from the audit which is undertaken in the business organization. When we consider business point of view, that time the organization is getting some advantages that consist of first advantage is detection of errors and frauds. We'll see in later page the meaning of error, the meaning of fraud, and how these errors and frauds are detected and prevented by the audit procedure that we'll see in next page. But this is the advantage to the business organization. When audit is carried out in the organization, that time audit is helpful for detection of errors and frauds. When errors and frauds are detected by the auditor in the audit process, ultimately control is established on the organization by detecting it in the audit. Second is that it is advantageous for taking loan from the banks or financial institutes. If the accounts are audited, the banks or financial institute consider such type of audited balance sheet, audited figures as a evidence, and ultimately it is easier to the business organization to get the loan from banks or financial institute on the basis of audited accounts. Third is it is helpful for building a reputation by the organization. When accounts are audited in the business organization, that time such accounts are indicating that those information shown by the profit and loss account in and balance sheet, it is clear, it is correct, it is accurate, and thereby it is helpful for building the reputation of the organization. Fourth advantage is that when audit is undertaken, that time audit is ensure the title, existence, and valuation of the assets. And ultimately, if valuation of asset is properly made, such proper valuation of asset is showing the true and fair financial position of the organization. So proper valuation of assets is also advantage to the business organization. Next advantage is that all of you are aware that the organization is always ultimately responsible to the government. Means organization is required to furnish the information to the government according to the statutory requirement. And if accounts are audited, that time such audited figures are easily accepted by the government authorities, and when government acceptance is easier, then it is advantageous to the business organization. And last advantage to the business organization is the audit is advantageous for update accounts of the organization. When audit is carried out in the organization, ultimately the accounts of the organizations are updated, and thereby the accounting information is usable to the organization, which is correct and accurate. These are various advantages to the business organization of the auditing. Second type of advantages to the consider toward the investor's point of view. All of you are aware that the companies are working in the business world which having a number of shareholders, number of investors. They are investing their money in the company form of organization. And if company's accounts are audited, then it is advantageous to the investor's point of view by different ways. The first advantage to the investor is that the audited accounts are protecting the interest of investors. Investors are ultimately trying to get proper return on their investment, as well they are intended to safeguard their investments. And when it is the intention of investors, that time audited account keep a control over the organization, and ultimately interest of the investors are protected by the audited accounts. Second is that there is moral check on the people who are working in the business organization. And when moral check is there on the people who are working in the business organization, then it is helpful for the investor's point of view. Third is that when accounts are audited, that time there are proper valuation of investments, and ultimately the investor get the real figure of the investments which are shown by the business organization. These are various advantages to the investors. Third is that other advantages. Third, that other advantages consist of: first advantage is it evaluate the financial status of the organization. In auditing, the books of accounts and record is verified and examined by the auditor, and ultimately financial status is evaluated. Then evaluation of financial status is the advantage of audit. Second is that listing of shares. When company shares are listed in the stock exchange, that time such a listing purpose, the accounts are required to be audited by the qualified auditor, and thereby it is helpful for listing of shares if the accounts are audited. Third advantage is that audited accounts are helpful for settlement of various claims, because when accounts are audited, that time audited information is providing the real and accurate figure, and thereby it is useful for settlement of various claims such as employees claims, third parties claims, creditors claim, etc. Next is evidence in court. Audited accounts are helpful for giving evidence in the court, because court is accepting the audited accounts as a real information. As well, it is helpful for settlement of accounts. When in business organization, in various situations, there are necessity to settle the accounts, that time the audited information is useful or authentic. Six is it facilitates the calculation of a purchase consideration. When business organization is required to decide the purchase consideration, at that time the audited figures are facilitate it, and thereby it is advantageous. As well, it is facilitate the taxation. Various tax authorities, when impose the tax or levy the tax and recover the tax, that time audited accounts are considered as accurate and real, and thereby it facilitate the taxation purpose also. Though there are these various advantages, but audit is not free from limitations. It has certain limitations, and that limitations are as follows. The first limitation of auditing is it is incomplete. It is incomplete since the process does not allow for all the transaction to be checked. We'll see in detail when we consider the audit process. In auditing, auditor when verify or examine the books of accounts and records, that time it is not possible on his or her part to check each and every transaction, and thereby he is checking the transaction on sample basis, and ultimately the verification or examination which took place is incomplete. This is the limitation. Second limitation is that it is not free from fraud, means it does not guarantee that the financial statements are free of frauds and financial irregularities, especially frauds has been done by management. If the management is involved in the fraudulent activities, that time management is taking due care, and ultimately such frauds are not easily identified by the auditor, and thereby the books of accounts or record which are audited by the auditor, these are not free of fraud. This is also limitation. Third limitation is that it does not guarantee profit. In audit process, it is checking of processes and transactions in an environment where everything is done as per standard operating procedures. The management cannot expect any additional efficiencies coming out of the audit process. It means auditing is a procedural activity, it having standard operating procedures, and thereby management cannot expect any additional efficiencies coming out the audit process, is also a limitation of auditing. Fourth limitation is that rely on experts. Auditor is a person who having knowledge of accountancy, knowledge of law, knowledge of business, etc. But auditor is not a person who is expert in all the field, and thereby auditor take the advice of some of the experts when he undergoes the audit of the organization. He is taking the advice of valuer, he is taking the advice of lawyer, taking the advice of architect, taking the advice of some domain expert. And when he is taking such advice from these expert people, that time ultimately he rely on the expert opinion which is given to him, and on the basis of that he is giving his opinion or he is conducting the audit. If such advice which is given by concerned person is not proper, ultimately the opinion which is given by the auditor is also wrong or is not proper. So it is also the limitation of auditing. Fifth limitation is that time constraint. The audit are always time bound due to cost as well as statutory constraints. And thereby auditor is hurried to complete the audit on time, may forget some work. Generally audit is undertaken after the end of financial year, and thereby auditor is required to complete his audit work within very short span. And when auditor is required to complete the audit within very short span, ultimately there are possibility that he may forget some work, and ultimately time constraint is also a limitation of auditing. And last limitation is that professional judgment. The process of audit requires the auditor to use judgment in the identification of audit risk, selection of appropriate auditing procedures, and interpretation of audit evidence. For the purpose of that, auditor follows the standard operating procedure and audit program. Every judgment taken by the auditor may not be sound one, and therefore slight misjudgment may result in very high risk prone area. This is also a limitation of auditing. By this way, these are the various limitations of auditing. It means audit is not free from limitation, and thereby though these limitations are there, but by considering the advantages of auditing, it is necessary in the business organization to undergo the audit and examine the books of accounts and records of the organization. We have seen that the audit is undertaken with an objective to detect and prevent the errors and frauds. So to the next time, we'll see that what is meant by error, what is meant by fraud. That aspect we consider to the next time. Thank you.